Welcome to a very special Sharpe Way. I know it's during the day. I know usually we do them at night. It's true. But as you guys know, I have been insanely busy, going nuts, doing crazy stuff, trying to make the world a better place. And so I've had to shift my Sharpe Ways to daytime sometimes. And today we do have a daytime show, which means I need you even more. Please get out there if you can. I need you, please, to like, comment, and share and let people know that we're doing this. It matters if you like it and comment, and all those cool Facebook and YouTube and Twitter algorithms connect. See what a tech guy I am. And they connect and they grow and we become bigger and better and our media gets stronger, and we have to have our media being stronger. So please do that right now. And of course, always like my Facebook page. If you haven't liked my Sharpe Way Facebook page, go right now and do it. Why are you looking at me? Go do it right now. Head over to the YouTube page. Subscribe to that too. It does matter. And follow me on Twitter, The Sharpe Way. I know many of you follow me at Larry Sharpe, and that's great. But what happens when the dictators of Facebook shut down my Larry Sharpe? We've got to have Sharpe Way ready. So please head on over to Sharpe Way also. Today I have on my show guest, the man himself, the man from the Mises Institute, president himself, Jeff Deist. It's so good to see you. Did I say it right, Jeff Deist?
Jeff Deist. Hey, Larry. How you doing?
That's what I meant. That's what I meant was Jeff Deist. Of course is what I meant. Yes, he is here. I'm so happy to have you. I'm glad you took some time out of your day to have this conversation. And we've met many times in the past. I'm glad that you've been able to take a few minutes out. Thank you for coming.
Sure, Larry. Great to see you.
And for people who want more on Jeff and Mises, please go to Mises.org. For a lot of people who may not know Mises, and for some people who do, I'll just recap real quickly. As a general rule, when it comes to being part of the liberty movement, most people will see Mises more as dealing with economics and maybe some foreign policy. And that's kind of really where I think most people would see where you fit in the movement. Am I off? Am I right? Tell me where I am there.
No, I think that's 100% accurate. I agree with that entirely.
Awesome. So this is a place where, as I've said many times, the liberty movement isn't just the party, right? It's many aspects of liberty. The LP is one of them, and that's obviously my baby, that I'm all about the LP. But I think all aspects are important. What I think so many people see left and right within the party, right? They see most people who spend their time concerned with social issues consider themselves or self-identify as more like left libertarians. And most people who consider themselves worrying more about economic issues tend to self-identify as more right libertarians. Do you fall into that?
Yeah, I'm not sure I buy the divide between economic issues and social or cultural issues. Mm-hmm. To me, it's all economics. I don't think you can separate politics from economics. I don't think you can separate society from economics, culture, or anything else. Yeah, I understand the left and right divide. Mm-hmm. Look, it exists everywhere. It's more of a cultural thing, I think, than a political thing. And it's human nature. We like to divide ourselves. We have tribal instincts.
Sure.
The old saying is the smaller the movement, the more vociferous the factions. So here we are. And a lot of this stuff has roots decades and decades ago. I mean, you can go back and talk about the sociology of all this. Mm-hmm. There are splits among economists. There are splits between sort of the Cato Reason camp and the Mises Institute camp. There were splits between Murray Rothbard and a lot of other people during his time. There are splits between the Randians and everyone else. There are splits between econometric people and pure theory people. I mean, it goes on and on and on. It's just, we like to split up the world. We like to make sense of it that way and find
it's not real? Are you saying, though, the splits? I mean, even though I get what you're saying that we like to split it up, but the fact that we do say it, right, there's a left and a right libertarian. If we believe it, doesn't that make it true?
Oh, it's real. I think it's real, but it goes a lot farther beyond one's stated or professed politics. I mean, let's say two people with a very different viewpoint both argue, well, we should get rid of the state or get rid of most of the state.
Sure.
Either way. Okay. Those two people can still be basically opponents,
Sure.
as strange as that sounds. In other words, there are people who would probably call themselves part of the libertarian movement. I don't know that I would call myself that. I don't really care.
Okay.
But the idea that someone believes in a whole set or a whole host of cultural precepts, which I don't accept, the way to deal with all this is to take away the state and its ability to weaponize us and
Sure.
our preferences against one another. I mean, that's, nobody cares about someone else's sports team preferences. Nobody cares about what flavor of ice cream somebody likes. Hey,
yes,
yeah, okay. I mean, other than Yankee fans, whom everyone hates.
Thank you.
We're all universally hate the Yankees.
And we hate you all back, so it's fair.
But beyond that, I mean, people understand, like, if you're into Slayer and somebody else is into Taylor Swift, you might kind of joke about each other, but
right.
it doesn't affect you. It doesn't hit you in the gut because Taylor Swift is not going to shut down metal anytime soon.
Right. Sure. Right.
And so that's why the state's the weapon here. That's the sword of Damocles that's hanging over all of our heads. So, I mean, if you take, I guess, what I would consider a garden variety left libertarian.
Okay.
And I would say that is someone whose cultural preferences are egalitarian, and that if they're a good libertarian and getting rid of the state actually, harmed their egalitarian preferences, they'd still want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
If they're a bad libertarian, they'd stop being a libertarian unless, that kind of system actually advanced their cultural preferences. I mean, it's not something I worry about, but it's a distinction. Look,
okay.
We're lucky though, Larry, because in 1975 there were 10 people in an apartment. So now we're big enough to have strife and divisions.
Yeah, this question just came up, which is, does the Mises Institute have any association with the Libertarian Party Mises Caucus? Are you guys connected in some way?
No, I mean, I know Michael Heiss.
Sure.
They thought, and I agree, that the Libertarian Party needed a strong economic sort of raison d'etre. I think all political parties should be economic, but I particularly think third parties should be economic focused, because the cultural war is a dead end. Social issues are intractable. The only realistic solution, if you want to call it that, to social issues is some degree of federalism. So that's
okay. So you aren't necessarily connected. You just agreed with them doing it.
I don't know that I personally agree, because an awful lot of time and energy goes into politics, which I'm not sure is always the best use of that time and energy, but it's not for me to say. I like those guys. I think the Libertarian Party is not an economic party. I think it's a self-actualization movement, which I don't like. So to the extent they're trying to rectify that, I suppose I support them. Yes. Okay.
Now that you brought the idea though of culture, right? The idea of culture and economics kind of being the only answer is economics. Can't you see, or do you see, maybe you don't, do you see that cultural barriers, the emotional barriers, emotional sides, I mean, they often override anything else, right? The brain doesn't want to do two things. It doesn't want to die, and it doesn't want to be embarrassed, and not always in that order.
Yeah.
Right. So people will very often do things that are directly against their best interest in order to some way, shape, or form save face or put themselves forward in their own peer group or something like that. So if we remove the cultural aspect or the social aspect, don't we by default attack the economic, because we can't move forward? We will act against what is in our economic or even sometimes physical best interest.
Well, I mean, people are holistic. You can't chop them up. And economics, I think, in most people's conception, is a dry thing. It just relates to the financial part of one's life, and it's siloed. Obviously, I see economics far differently in terms of praxeology and all human action and these sorts of things. But I get what you're saying with regard to the general public, trying to advance what you and I would consider a more liberal government. So I don't know how you do that other than I do know that economic ignorance is really at the heart of most politics. Now,
I would agree with that.
If you look at political leaders, some of them may just be sociopaths who desire power or dominion over others or wealth. I mean, there is that, but there's an awful lot of people in politics who are simply well-meaning, well-intentioned.
Agreed.
They really do think that their egalitarian economic policies are going to produce more equality, more prosperity for less affluent folks. I mean, there's plenty of people who think that, and I would argue that
AOC is my congressperson.
Yeah. Okay. So
I would argue that I know
she's mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
But so going at, I think there's a niche, and I think there's an important one for trying to combat economic ignorance. And if somebody in the libertarian movement, let's say, wants to say, "Oh, you Mises guys are too narrow. All you care about is dollars and cents and economics. What about all these other issues? And you're not going to resonate with people emotionally. You can't defeat, AOC with dry technical arguments, that sort of thing."
I hear that.
I get that, but I think we're here to be, one part of what we would consider a movement towards a better, freer society. We're not here to be all things to all people.
Well, I tell a story often, and I don't know if I've told it to you or not. During my normal daily work, when I can work, when the government allows me to work, Jeff, when the government allows me to work and do my actual job, then I actually train government workers, to tell you the truth. I train a lot of people in departments in the New York City. I train leadership and things of that sort. It's what I do for a living. And in one of those classes, this is during lunch, I never talk about politics unless it's during a break and someone brings it up. So it's during a break, and it's about 20 people or so in the room. And they are all, again, educated and credentialed adults, all of them. Youngest is maybe 30, oldest is maybe 60. So in that area of adults, mostly males, but female too. This is the group of people I'm talking to. And all now somehow live in the New York City metro area. One person says during the break, and this is probably 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, he says, "Oh, I'm so glad we have the Fed. Without the Fed, I mean, they saved us during the crash. It was so good that we have them." And all I did was say, "Hey guys, just curious, do you guys know the Fed's basically just a private bank? That's all it really is." And every one of them, no, it isn't. No, why would you? No. And I said, just Google it, man. Just Google it. You got your phones, Google it. And they start Googling. 20 seconds, 10 seconds later, oh my God. Yeah. It's basically it's a bank cartel. It's kind of what it is, right? It's private. And they're like, "Oh my God, I can't believe it." And then I said, "Do you guys know that it just magically makes money?" And when I said that, and I'll be very clear, Jeff, they had just been proven that I was right 30 seconds ago. And every one of them, "No, it doesn't. No, that's not true." They didn't believe it. I said, "Just Google it." And they Google it. And all of a sudden they're like, oh my God, that's real. And I bring this up because it goes directly to your economic ignorance point. And again, these aren't some guy you would think, "Oh, this is some dumb kid in middle school." No, these are educated, credentialed adults who work for the government. And they didn't know that the Fed wasn't a private bank. And they didn't know that it could make money. They didn't know. And this is where we are. So as a plug for the LP, what I would say is one of the best ways of educating is by having some good candidates out there who can talk about these things and bring this to the forefront and kind of help with some of this economic ignorance thing here. See, some of us, there's some value in the LP.
Well, these people probably also wonder why a one-bedroom condo in Manhattan's $3 million.
Yes.
Well, yes. Not just supply and demand; it's partly supply and demand.
Right.
Yeah, and that's that brings me to I'm interested in a conversation about sort of the sociology of libertarianism or the libertarian movement, such as it is at the moment, or whatever. And I guess from my perspective, I understand you're running for vice president.
I am.
For the Libertarian Party, and I also understand. Correct me if I'm wrong. The Libertarian Party selects its vice president independently. There's no ticket.
That's correct.
Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay, so
correct.
So what I mean, and I'm not saying this facetiously or academically. I mean, what's the goal? What do you hope to obtain by doing?
Yeah, that? No. I love the question. It's a valid question. What I'm happy to answer. I have many But the number one thing I want to do, which is why I'm running for VP, people have asked me, Larry, why don't you run for, local government, or why don't you run for this or run for that? And there's a very important reason. I don't know if you followed my gubernatorial run at all, but when I ran for governor, I asked people for a lot. I asked them for money. I asked them for time. I asked them for energy. I asked them for their creativity. I bugged them for a lot. And I took my life on hold. I didn't work for a year and a half. So I put my life on hold for that. Why would I do that? Because I wanted to make some form of impact. And we did. What did we do? We gained ballot access for the first time in New York State in 40 some odd years, first time ever. And then the next year after, I then traveled the state again, and we got 103 people to win on the L line that we'd never had before. Now, many of those were fusion candidates. But what does that mean? That means of 103, 7 were libertarians. The others were some form of mix, meaning libertarian and Democrat, libertarian and Republican, libertarian and conservative, libertarian and something. Okay. What did that do? That literally shifted the conversation towards a more liberty-minded world. It was a shift. It was a cultural shift. Did it make a whole bunch of, 1 million libertarians? No. Did it make 100,000 libertarians? Yeah. Did it make a bunch of people who are running as R's or D's have to think more about liberty-minded politics? Yes, or they couldn't get our nomination. So they had to start thinking that way. I still, to this day, get recognized in the street from like my Joe Rogan thing. Hey, it's Larry Joe Rogan. Or they like my regulate cannabis like onions. And they go, regulate like onions. So I still have people doing that to this day. My goal now is to support. I bring this story up because I don't run locally because I don't want to waste people's time, money, and energy if I can't make impact. So your question is a valid question. I only run when I think I can. When I ask somebody for money and they give it to me, they get a return on that investment. They did when I ran for governor. They will now, because I'm going to make sure that I support our presidential candidate to make sure they're communicating effectively, to make sure that they are getting the message across in the right way, to where they can still be principled, but still be approachable. This is what I've done, my life that I've done since I've been in this party since 2012. I've gone out of my way for the past 8 years, making some of my most important life decisions based upon me making the liberty message palatable for others. And that's what I tend to achieve. In my home run, Jeff, we actually win a couple of states. That would be magical. That is what I really want to do, because if we get a gold state or two on that electoral map, that would be branding that no one else could possibly match. It would help every downstate libertarian candidate for the next 4 years, because they'd see that gold state somewhere on the map. That's my home run. That gets it out of the park for me, brother. That's what I want.
Well, but that leads us to something else, though. Is this a technocratic elite top-down message, or is this a populist bottom-up message?
It's a good question. I think I'm trying to do both. I don't think only one can work, because I think some people are waiting for a leader. And some people, like I say this all the time when it comes to libertarians, it makes libertarians angry. And that is, people will say, well, they got to be free. People love freedom. No, I live in New York City. There's a lot of people who don't want to be free. There's a lot of people who just want a leader and want to be told what to do. And one of the reasons why people want that, this actually goes to my leadership training, is many people don't want to be free because then they don't have to be responsible. As long as Jeff is telling me what to do, if something goes wrong, it's all Jeff's fault because Jeff said it, right? I didn't decide, Jeff did. So Jeff's the bad guy when things go wrong. And when things go good, I'll just praise Jeff because I'm lucky, right? But when things go poorly, I'll just blame him. So I think you have to have both. This is a combination. It is me trying to show people what I think they should do by example, and then those underneath copying to the best of their ability for those who want to grow from the bottom. I think it's both.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting point, especially New York City is so different, so unique relative to so much of the country. So you're talking about potholes, you're talking about crime, you're talking about the almost the literal conditions around your particular block or something mean a lot to you. There's 100%. If there's a lot of bums, let's say.
Noise control.
Yeah, I mean, so that's the thing. And here's the irony. I think the populist versus elitist split We find it in red state versus blue state. We find it in Trump, anti-Trump. We find it in Rothbard, Cato.
Yep.
We find it in Hayek, Rothbard. We find it in so many places, and we find it in today's libertarian movement. We find it in the people who like and dislike the Mises Institute.
Mm-hmm.
And here's what's so strange about it. In a certain sense, Rothbard was a completely intellectual person. I mean, almost completely living in his head. He did, he liked sports, he liked music, he did have outside interests, but this was a guy who just produced volume and volume of thought and word.
Yes.
And so, but the irony here is that nonetheless, he is viewed, I think, 25 years after his death, as a populist figure.
Okay.
More from that right side of libertarianism, whereas let's say the Cato Institute is viewed as a pro-globalist, pro-elitist, technocratic, top-down leader. And of course, this in part is connected to Friedrich Hayek, who's obviously an avatar of his own. And Hayek argued for, creating an intellectual cadre, a class of academics and media people who would percolate the ideas, and then they would sort of push them down to what are called secondhand dealers of ideas.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And that this was how it would spread more broadly. So there was a top-down intellectual or academic approach. And Rothbard, of course, wrote about this, opposed it, thought it was wrong. He was the opposite. He said, no, you got to rouse up the bottom up people. And so
I think you do. I agree. I think you have to do that. Yes. But
so
I don't think it's one way though.
But here's the thing is, what Rothbard pointed out about Hayek is that the problem with elites is that a lot of them are actually pretty happy with the way things are.
Yes.
I mean, almost by definition,
Absolutely.
Once you have, let's say, and you don't have to be a Mike Bloomberg elite. I mean, you can just be a tenured professor at Columbia with an academic sinecure. You may not want to go out there and argue for tearing down public education.
Yep.
From a libertarian perspective, because you have a vested interest in sort of the conferences and the travel and the cocktail parties.
I'll go even lower than that. You're a county chair in the LP party, and you've only had 4 people in your party for the past 20 years. And if the party grows, you might lose your seat. I'll go down to that level. You're totally correct. When people are in charge, they often don't want change. I agree with you. I mean, again, I've seen it. People who have been a part of a county LP with 4 people in the entire damn county, but it's their small fiefdom, and damn it, I'm keeping it. And I don't want Larry Sharpe coming in here and getting 8 more people into my affiliate. I might lose my seat. So they're now mad at me because I grew their affiliate. Yes.
So, okay, but in an election year, presidential election year, what does that mean? I mean, should Judge Jim Gray be talking about sending a missile into the Eccles building, or should he be talking about potholes?
It's a great question. I think as a general rule, if you do this right, the right way of doing it is by letting each individual ask you questions and you answer them. The AMA style of retail politics is everything, right? I spent my time doing that, and I would go into farmland, and all they talk about is dairy farms. And I would discuss farming because that mattered to them. They didn't care about potholes. They were driving tractors. It was irrelevant to them, right? You go into the city and they're worried about, well, I'm so worried because they don't pick the garbage up. And I was running for governor, and a lot of that stuff I couldn't deal with. I dealt with both sides of this, right? I dealt with the point where while I was running for governor, they would say things like, well, the stop sign keeps getting knocked down. I have no power over the stop sign being knocked down. Or the reverse. They'd walk up, and this is a story that I just love so much. And it showed so much of where the emotion is. This is 2018. I'm in North Country, and I'm talking to a farmer. The farmer comes up to me and says, tells me a terrible story. Larry, I've had my farm for 6 generations. I'm afraid I'm going to lose it. Everything's bad. The world's ending. And then he asked me a question. And I thought, oh, it's going to be a farming question. No, his question was, what do you think about Trump? Trump was going to be president no matter what I did. Trump is not going to help out his farm. Whether I think Trump is the greatest president in the world or the worst in the world is irrelevant to his farm. It meant nothing. But in both cases, the stop sign getting knocked down or President Trump, I had nothing to do with it. However, I had to answer both questions. The number one thing I had to do is not give him an answer. I had to give him a feeling. I had to be empathetic first. The guy actually didn't care if I had an answer. He cared if I cared. That was number one thing. That's politics.
This goes to the almost impossibility of libertarian politics in the sense that people care about who is on whose side.
Yes.
So, in other words, if some guy's running for city council, who cares what they think about abortion or foreign policy?
Yes,
right?
Absolutely.
They're running for city council. But
yes,
it's
that
still
guy you care about the stop sign.
Because people want someone like them. They want one of their people on city council. He's not one of us. And so I was discussing this the other day with Tom Woods. Lenin came up with whom and whom. Who is on whose side? And so, when you start to look at it that way, you can understand that, New York is at least 2 states, if not 3 or 4.
Yes.
It's ungovernable.
Right.
Ungovernable.
Right.
And I'm sure that people in Albany resent the crap out of New York City for its, or not people in Albany, not meaning the state capital, but people in upstate.
Yes.
Resent the crap out of Manhattan's political power in the legislature. That's natural.
All the time. Yep.
Okay. So I do, here's my populist plug. I think any third party should be aggressively decentralist and localist at least in tenor, I also think a third party should be aggressively populist. I disagree with the idea that populism is an ideology. It's not an ideology. Populism is an empty vessel. Populism is simply anti-elitism, okay? And from my perspective, anti-elitism is entirely justified in 2020 America. When we look at the 20th century and now the early 21st, okay, who are these elites? These people at Columbia, in government, in media, in medicine. They screwed up. They screwed up War and Peace.
Yep.
With 2 horrific world wars, a still ongoing police action in Korea, and endless wars in the Middle East, and a Cold War, which is utterly unnecessary. Okay. They screwed up banking royally, not just both commercial and central banking. They absolutely ruined education. Our great grandfathers were, by 8th grade, they knew more than we know.
Yes.
They absolutely destroyed medicine, which used to be a cash for basic service and insurance for emergencies only. They destroyed law. They turned law into a tort roulette system. So where, from the neoliberal perspective, which is shared by, let's say, a lot of people at Cato, they say, well, the 20th century is this great liberal success. I don't know that that's true. I look at the 20th century and think what could have been. Sure. Without those 2 world wars, without central banking, without the Great Society program, without the New Deal and all the economic drag that all of that created. So, what populism, when people look down their nose at populism, say, oh my God, look at these Trump rednecks, oh my God, they've got an AK-47 at the Michigan State House or something. Okay, well, it's not like you guys were doing such a swimming job with it.
I think we're on the same page on that level, right? I do think that you have to be kind of populist, but the problem is populism very often creates demagoguery, right? It just creates it.
But populism is democracy good and hard. So, I was listening to Chuck Schumer today. If that guy's not a demagogue, I don't know who is.
True.
Yes. he would argue that he's the farthest thing from a populist.
Of course.
Furthest thing, I should say.
But there's a minor difference, and both bad, but minor difference. If Chuck Schumer is retired or leaves or goes away or has an accident, insert thing here, and they put in Bob Jones, whoever that guy is, it's a swap. Now Bob Jones gets that seat. He's now the new demagogue. He's the new guy. It doesn't matter. It's not based upon Chuck Schumer. Nobody likes Chuck Schumer, not even his family, right? So nobody likes Chuck Schumer. However, when it comes to Trump, people really love Trump, and it really is about him. That's the difference that I see in those two. You can't just swap out Trump. I mean, there are people who love Trump who are literally talking about his dynasty, right? So the daughter is next, then the son comes after her. This way you can keep Trump for 50 years. This is not a joke. Some people believe this to be true because it has to be Trump. That is my biggest worry when it comes to pub, that we don't do that. It's one of the reasons why you see me doing what I do. And this is going to sound silly, Jeff, but I actually care about this. According to New York State law, when I won ballot access by New York State law, I was by default the party chair. That's how it works in New York State election law. What's the first thing I did? I was the party chair for literally two actions. I called the meeting to order, and then I ran the election to replace me. And I walked away. I'm not even part of, I'm just a member of my party in New York State. I have no leadership whatsoever in my party. None. I walked away. Now, people ask what's up. Larry, why don't you run for president? Why don't you run for president? I'm trying to show support by supporting others, right? I have to build a culture. And I have this in my body, in my brain from my old Marine Corps days, right back here, you see the picture, my old Marine Corps days. The hill has to be taken. The captain got shot. So what? Take the hill. The machine gun's broken. Okay. I got it. Take the hill. Yeah, that's where my head is.
That's a populist message. I mean, the fact that you were in the Marine Corps in and of itself sets you apart from what we might call the Luftmenschen, right? The think tank types. Mm-hmm. So here's my test. Here's a simple test. Okay. And I'll include you. I'll include Larry Sharpe.
Please, go
ahead. Trump, Bill Clinton, George W. Bush. Okay. You could take any of those guys and you could drop them into a biker bar in Alaska. Mm-hmm. And in 10 minutes, they'd be laughing, buying rounds, connecting.
Okay? I've done it.
You take Mitt Romney, Hillary Clinton, Elizabeth Warren, can't do it. Okay.
I agree.
So we have what's called a natural person.
Yep.
And so, you've got a little bit of that. You're likable. Now, the flip side of that, let me throw out a critique.
Go ahead, please. The flip side
is if you're Larry Sharpe and everybody, let's say in the libertarian movement, loves you or thinks you're a good guy, if you're
not true, but I wish it was true.
If everybody likes you, then does nobody like you? You know what I'm saying? Or vice versa. If you're everyone's friend, you're no one's friend, because there are sides to that. You know what I'm saying? And
yeah. I see what you're
saying. You're sort of shaping yourself to the environment rather than being a person with a steady core and take me as I am or F off.
No, I think you're right.
That's a danger.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think what you'll find I know you're not that connected to the party, but if you find the party, there's always a side that's angry at me. The left party side of the party will be angry because I had you on. They'll be mad at me because of that. I'm going to get notes and I'm going to get texts. I know that already. Probably already have them, right? I'm going to get them saying, why'd you have this guy on? He's one of those right-leaning guys, right? That's going to happen already. And when I had Mike Shipley, who's very much on the left side, when I had him on last week, the right was like, why do you platform that guy? So people are always mad at me because I do what you say, and I try to be as inclusive as I can, and I try to bring people in. How that has translated for me is the people on the most fringe part of the party can't stand me. They hate me. They think I water things down. I'm not good enough. The people in the most fringe. The people as you move in, they hate me periodically and love me periodically. Oh, he put my guy on. He's good for my guy. I love him again. Oh, he didn't. I hate him again. They bounce back and forth. Yeah. The people in the middle tend to like me as a general rule. That's how it tends to pan out, because I think you're right. People do, absolutely. I have to have people hating me. The amount of I get hate stuff all the time, believe it or not. I have a team of people who check my most of my social media, and I get hate stuff all the time, and I don't mind it. I actually, to your point, I'm like, good. That means if I don't have any enemies, I'm doing something wrong. I gotta have some. I completely agree.
I mean, Larry, you live in New York City. I mean, you're down here in college town, Auburn, Alabama. It's just rainbows and unicorns. Okay.
I love that.
Look, I think this is.
I'm not against your idea at all. I'm not against your concept at all. I think the idea is good. I just think it also has a problem, right? It's also bad. Both are bad, right? If we go too much of a problem.
I think libertarians were absolutely almost as much as the left were and are contempt filled when it comes to Trumpers. I think this is wrong. I think it's a huge mistake. Look, I live in Auburn, Alabama, college town of about 75,000 people. In the perception of the country, I grew up in Anaheim, California. Mm-hmm. So when I was moving to Alabama, all of my relatives were asking me questions like I was moving to Madagascar or something. Okay,
sure.
Like, are there giant animals, on the side of the road or something? So I have a little bit of that zeal of like a recent religious convert has for their religion. I have a little bit of that. My antenna goes off when people criticize the South.
Sure.
Now, and I'm not a Southerner. I mean, I'm an honorary. They let me live here. So, everyone probably thinks that Alabama is deep red Trump country, right?
It isn't.
And so, look, the red states voted red, the blue states voted blue, a handful of swing states, six states that Trump swung from Obama, a few 100,000 scattered votes, mostly baby boomers who were economically insecure and worried, many of whom voted for Obama once, if not twice, voted for Trump. Okay, the idea that this was some uprising of redneck white America, some people in Alabama would have preferred to vote for Mike Huckabee or Ted Cruz.
Agreed.
They got Trump. They weren't going to vote for Hillary, so they held their noses and they voted for Trump. There weren't a lot of Trump signs. I saw way more Trump signs when I was up in Pennsylvania near State College.
Yeah.
I saw Trump signs on the side of barns. I saw Trump signs everywhere. There were virtually none in Alabama.
Well, look,
this is what people don't understand.
Because there's no requirement, right? I mean, look, the reality of it is, it isn't red state versus blue state. It's urban versus rural, right? The cities of Alabama are blue, and the rural areas of New York are red. So I get that, but I'm going to give you an interesting thing I saw. This is true when I was running for governor. A guy sent me a picture. It was a picture of him in front of his house. And in front of his house, he has 4 signs/flags. First one, Gadsden flag, right? Don't tread on me. Second one, Confederate flag, right? Rebel flag. Third one, Trump flag. Fourth one, Larry Sharpe for governor. Yes, all 4 of those, right? Sitting there in front, right? In front of his house, right? He sends me a picture. And my wife looks at this, people are going to go, oh my God, what? How is that? What? Oh my God, what? I said, no, you don't understand. In his mind, this goes back to my emotional piece, Jeff. In his mind, all 4 of those flags are the same. They are symbols of rebellion. That's all they were. In his head, he's tired of what's happening. He's angry and he wants to rebel and no one's listening. And I'm going to put up the biggest rebellion flags I can find, which are the rebel flag, the Gadsden flag, Trump in New York, and Larry Sharpe running third party in New York. Wow. That was the biggest thing you could possibly find. That's an emotional piece. So that's piece 1 I want to bring up. But it's the second piece. Rhetoric, to our point, doesn't work when you're third party. Rhetoric only works when there's what you talked about, the left, right, good, evil side. That's when rhetoric works every single time. But when there isn't a left, right, when there are 3, 4, or 5, that's when answers have to matter. That's when I've got to move you first emotionally, and then I've got to show you something's in it for you. Otherwise, you don't hear me. And that's how I moved people, by not going, we got to get government out of stuff. No one gives a shit. Doesn't matter. People don't care about that. Most people think government's good for them, particularly in New York City. Most of them think government's the only answer, right? Sure. So I don't do that. So instead I say, I hear what you're saying. Don't you want the same outcome as me? They go, yeah. Let me show you a way of doing it without adding government and by adding community instead. Just doing that, or even just breaking the monopoly of government, just saying government's a monopoly. How about I give you another option along with your monopoly? I break that and give you 2 options. Doing that gets people to understand and follow me. That's why I've grown. It wasn't because I'm super smart or super handsome. I mean, I am super handsome, obviously, but that is the reason. The reason is because I gave people answers and slogans that they could repeat to others. And that is, I think, how we move people from that. Why does the biker guy, and I went to biker bars in upstate New York. Why did the biker guy actually talk to me? Because when I sat in the back by the fire pit, and it's a true story, and the guy started yelling at me, which is what actually happened, I started giving him actual answers. Well, how do you handle this, Mr. Smart Guy? How do you handle this, Mr. New York City? That's what he told me, called me Mr. New York City. So when he did that, I said, that's a great question. I said, how about I leave you alone? How about I let you be you and you let me be me? How about I accept and respect who you are? Let me explain how I make that work. And at the end of that conversation, he goes, look, this is his words. God damn it, I may vote for you. That's how I think we win, is by making that happen, connecting the way you said, being real, giving them some serious answers, and agreeing on the outcome. That's the issue. Do we agree on the outcome first? Not even worrying about, how do we get there? First on the outcome. I literally did, last 3 weeks, I went through Bernie Sanders' policies, as social as can be. So many policies. And I broke them down and didn't critique them at all. What I did was explain what the actual outcome we all want and how we get there in a libertarian message. It's 5 hours of me just literally looking at it and saying, here's how we do the Green New Deal. Here's how we do education. Here's how we do healthcare. Here's how we do racial justice. Boom, 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 boom. I've got more views on that than I can't tell you how many shares and views I have on that, because people want to know. And these are Bernie bros who are looking at the liberty movement. So I guess I'm pitching the LP to you, Jeff. See that? I'm pitching it to you. There's some value. There's some education there. And the biggest thing I'll bring at the last piece, well, I'll pump the LP a bit. Right now in today's world, with fractured media and people only picking up what they want in their own media, the very few people actually able to cross over all the media, it's politicians now. There aren't movie stars like there used to be. There aren't, big guys. They don't exist. It's politicians. It's why Kim Kardashian goes to the White House. It's why Kanye West goes to the White House, because the politicians cross over Twitter and Facebook and Netflix, and they cross over everything. AOC has a Netflix special, right? So they all cross over. If we get a couple of good LP candidates who can make that crossover, they can change this country. Did I pitch the LP good enough for you?
Yeah, I think, first of all, the guy with the Gadsden flag, look, did he vote for you? That's the only question.
I assume he did. Yeah, I don't know if he did, but I assume he did, because why else? For a guy who would actually take that picture and send it to me, that guy, he did two things. He probably did.
So the point is that the R's and D's don't care why you voted for him.
Correct.
Look, yes. Right. They'd like you to make a donation, but they don't even care if you're a member of their party. What do they agree. Care? They just want you to vote, and so that they can stay in. I mean, that's really the whole enchilada there. You probably remember famous book, Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Love it. Absolutely.
Right? So nobody under 30 or 40 knows what that book is. But anyway, there's a chapter in there called You Can't Win an Argument.
Yep.
And so he has this phrase that he took actually from an old epic poem from the 1600s. A man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still. Yes. And that's what you're saying, which is that you can't win an argument. You can't argue with people. You can't persuade them. There's a front line.
Oh, hold on. Winning an argument and persuading are two separate things.
Well, okay, but hear me out. There's a frontline series right now on PBS called Divided America. Real brilliant novel title. No one's thought of that. So they've had a bunch of people, Robert Reich, you name it, but they had Steve Bannon on. And Steve Bannon says, we're in post-persuasion America. It's all about mobilization. You just got to get people to vote and do this. He says everyone has a cell phone, and in 2 seconds you can go on there. In other words, the cost of obtaining information, whether that's reading about politics, reading a candidate's platform, hearing arguments for policies, all that. He said, the cost of all that has never been less. It's 5 minutes of your time. You move your wrist and use your thumb to tap a screen. Versus 30 years ago, 50 years ago, it might have meant reading newspapers, attending events.
Sure.
Much more active participation. Whereas now, if we had any kind of reasonable country, even voting would just be, touch your phone and be done.
Sure.
So so he takes this to mean that we're in post-persuasion America. Everyone's heard all the arguments for socialism. Everyone's heard all the arguments for capitalism. Everyone's heard endless things about guns and abortion, all this other crap, and they've just dug in and they are where they are, and that's that. Now, I don't know if that's true, but I understand what he's saying.
It's not true. What the part of that's true is politically he's right, meaning you've got 90 million Americans in 2016 who didn't bother voting, right? So those people probably aren't going to vote again unless something changes, right? So what is the goal? To get my team out. And, that only happened obviously. It was been happening for years since the 60s, but it only happened obviously in the second term of Obama. First term of Obama and before, every president was at least ostensibly saying, I'm a president of everybody, all Americans. There's one America. We're all together. I'm a uniter, not a divider. They were all saying that. Second term of Obama, he was like, I don't care. Democrats vote for me. Get me in. And then Trump came in and just doubled down. And now he's triple down. He's like real Americans and not real Americans. I mean, he has literally doubled and tripled down on this. So in this case, he's right. If my people show up, I win, right? If I motivate, I win. And that works when it's just left and right. That doesn't work if you're a third party, because a third party has to get those people who haven't voted to get up and vote. And number two, I don't need to win an argument. I need to have many conversations and persuade somebody. And here's a critical piece. And I bring up my military experience again. I spent some time when I was in the Marine Corps in intelligence. And we did some classes and we talked about things like interrogation, things of that sort when I was in intelligence. And one of the things they showed us was an interview from an Army officer from the Korean War. Now, this interview was in the 90s. Remember, I was in the Marine Corps in the 80s. And this was later in my career. The interview was actually done in the late 80s, early 90s. So he was already older, but it was from when he was captured in the Korean War in 1951 or 2. A Chinese interrogator interrogates him and is talking to him about, how great communism is and how wonderful it is, how fair it is. And this Army officer is literally the stereotype. He's a West Point graduate from New England, wealthy. He's exactly what you would think of. He's that stereotype. And he says this. He goes to the Chinese guy. He goes, look, you're going to tell me communism is good? When this war is over, I go back to my big house, my rich family, my hot wife. I go back to all this stuff. Don't stop. And the Chinese interrogator tells him, I don't need to convince you that communism is good. Never. All I have to convince you is that your way isn't perfect and you'll leave Korea. That's all he wanted to do. You're not perfect and you'll leave Korea. When I have conversations with people, I just want them to believe red or blue isn't perfect. It isn't the only answer. And the second I make that crack, that it's not perfect, it isn't the only answer. It's not vote blue no matter who, or better, red than dead or whatever. It's not that, right? If it's not that, now they might hear me. And the glory of this is the most zealous, to your earlier point, the most zealous of the converted. When I get that person who was a Bernie bro lefty to become a libertarian, oh my God, they're my best activist. They are my best activist and they will convert more and more and more. My argument isn't necessarily for him or her. My argument is for everyone else watching. And if that person actually converts, they stay with me. I have a lot of people still in my campaign today. My campaign's been over for 2 years, and they still help me to this day. And many of them are former Democrats and former Republicans. I think it can be done. It's just hard. And most of the stuff we talk about, it's with a left-right paradigm. I'm going to pump myself a little bit. No one has run a bigger Big L campaign since 2016 than me. And when I ran that campaign, I learned a whole lot, made a lot of mistakes, and screwed up a whole lot of ways. But man, am I smarter for it. Man, am I smarter for it. So now you ask me, what am I going to do this year? I'm going to take all the stuff that I screwed up in 2016, in 2018, and put it into 2020. Can be done. It's just hard.
Well, I mean, let me suggest a way forward.
Please.
When you talk about the RD paradigm, the binary, neither one's perfect. Even the bluest and reddest know that.
Right.
So here's the problem. The Constitution basically says, and all this starts at the federal level and it trickles down. I mean, why do we have R's and D's on city council? I mean, come on.
Yes.
It's absurd. It's absurd. but
Right.
nonetheless, the Constitution basically says that Congress and the Senate can operate by whatever rules they make. So there was no mention of parties. So unfortunately, the House and the Senate came up with a system where the majority party in either body controls everything, controls the legislative calendar, what gets voted on, controls all the committees. It's basically the grand poobah, even if they just have a 1 or 2 seat majority in the body.
Right.
So that's, so as a result of that, we have this really strongly binary system at the federal level that trickles down. Mm-hmm. So Henry Hazlitt actually wrote a book about this, about, wishing that we had more of a parliamentary system in the United States, like the UK, because, for example, as far as I'm concerned, a third party, whether that's the LP or otherwise in the United States, could be like UKIP in the UK. I mean, be a single issue party that exists, that actually disbands, let's say. In other words, I think there are single issue coalitions out there that we are missing out on. I think there are dollar bills laying on the ground, which we could be picking up every day. I don't think there's any constituency for these Middle Eastern wars outside of Washington, D.C. Beltway. I think that cuts across socioeconomic class, cuts across red and blue, across, North Dakota, Kansas City, you name it. But because of the RD thing, you can't come together into a meaningful anti-war coalition. So it's a stubborn problem. Right. And that could apply to anti-Fed sentiment. A lot of, the Fed is complex, as you were saying, people don't understand how it operates, but they do smell a rat. They sense that the Fed and Wall Street and the Treasury Department sort of come together to create this undeserving, unjustly wealthy class. And that happens to be true. That's a left critique, but it happens to be true. Mm-hmm. So there are all these examples of single issue coalitions. I think when you come in with a third party that wants to have a broad, sweeping agenda, very, very tough. I would love to see a single issue party. And I gotta hand it to the UKIPers. I mean, they dissolved. They got Brexit and they dissolved. I mean, that's about the damnest thing I ever heard of.
Yes.
So to me, maybe this is where the future lays. But each side thinks, and a lot of libertarians have fallen into the centralization trap. We got to win everything with 1,000 legislators in DC, or maybe even just 5 people in black robes on the Supreme Court, even worse. As opposed to, I don't care if different states have different gun laws. Mm-hmm. I mean, honestly, some people say that the Second Amendment effectively federalized the issue and preempts state law. I disagree. A lot of historians will say nobody thought the Bill of Rights applied to states at the time. Mm-hmm. So, we can argue about that. But I mean, do we really need the same? If you're walking down the street in Manhattan with a certain military style rifle slung over your back, that's a little different than if you're doing that in the middle of nowhere in Alaska.
True.
Okay. Do we have to have the same rules? A lot of libertarians say, yes, we got to have one rule.
Well, look, this is the point that I bring up all the time, right? I have the 80-20 rule. You may have heard it before, right? It's a business rule. It's also, Ronald Reagan talked about it. It's the idea that if I agree with someone 80% of the time, they're my ally, right? They're not my enemy. They are my ally. And I can accept that 20% as long as there isn't a litmus test. And some people have a litmus test. I don't, right? But if you don't have a litmus test, right, it's 80%, we're good. Then let's start moving forward. I want to turn, I live in New York City. I have watched this COVID crisis show me who my fellow citizens are. And we are over 50%, a bunch of people affected with Stockholm Syndrome. We are over 50% of my state thinks that my governor destroying our economic future is the greatest thing in the world. Now, my governor's a Democrat. And in New York State, the most recent poll, 60% of Republicans think he's doing a good job. They're supposed to hate him. They're Republicans. He's a Democrat. And they think he's doing it. 80% of Democrats think he's doing a good job. 80% as he destroys our city and our state. And they are clapping. Thank you, sir. May I have another? So it's shown me where we actually are. We're in trouble. I just want to move the country towards freedom. Just face that direction. Stop marching so fast in this direction. How about just slow your march first? Then I'll get you to turn around and then go in the opposite direction. And if I can get someone to do that, Jeff, I'm in. I'm in. I'm exactly the opposite of what you're saying. I'm the opposite of it's got to be this. I'm like, just get it going this way, and let's fight about how that works when it gets there. But I realized something else. Because we've been failing so much, a lot of libertarians are desperate and angry and disrespected. So they come out hard, like you're saying. It's got to be everything and now. And we get nothing. But the market has taught us something. If you want to have a product explode and do well and to really move out and to be viral, it has to be radical enough to be interesting, but familiar enough to adopt. It's got to be both. And one of the few things that worked well for me and when I was running, and I learned a lot of these lessons the hard way as they failed, was this regulate like onions thing that I brought up for cannabis, right? Regulate makes Democrats feel good. We're regulating, right? Like onions, not really regulated. So it's basically like regulate like nothing, right? But that is a slogan that is interesting. Treating a drug like onions, interesting, but also familiar. We're going to regulate it. So we've got to find those types. And it's hard. Most businesses can't do it. They fail at it. Political parties fail at it too. But if we understand that mindset, radical enough to be interesting, but familiar enough to be adopted, we can begin to move this country in the right direction, adding both emotion and logic with an actual plan to break that left-right paradigm. That's where I'm going.
So if you want, and I think the left has done this, they've created a revolution within the form.
Yeah.
As Garrett put it, within the form of constitutionalism, within the form of the Democratic Party.
Yep.
So if somebody wants to move the country or move their city council, move their county commission, whatever it is, in a more liberty direction, why not just look at the facts on the ground and either run as an R or a D? Who cares? Why LP?
That's a great question. The first thing is, if you run as an R or a D and you don't want to kiss the ring of the local R or a D, you won't get on the ballot. You'll lose in your primary. You simply won't even get in the ballot. So you could try to run as an R or D if you want to, but in most places, not all, I know in New York City for sure, you're not even going to get on the ballot. There'll be no chance to even anyone to vote for you. It's not going to happen. You'll lose in the primary or you won't get on the ballot. It's not going to happen. If you run as an LP, the value of the LP, why do people every 4 years rush to our ballot? Why all of a sudden become libertarians? Because you get on the ballot, right? When other people try to run as independent or whatever the case may be, they can't get in the ballot. You've got to run as an R or a D. Bernie tried this. How'd it work for him twice in a row? No, doesn't work. Bloomberg tried it. Didn't work either. So that's why you have to run an LP, because of how the laws are. Do you want to get on the ballot? Do you want to actually have people have a chance to hear your message? You got to run as something other than an R or a D. They're simply going to shut you out. They're not going to hear you. And I'll give you an example in New York State. The woman who ran against Governor Cuomo here in 2018, an actress, popular actor, the woman who was in Sex and the City.
Oh, yeah, right. I remember.
Absolutely, right? Popular. It wasn't like people didn't know. She lives in Manhattan. Like, you can go and see her, have coffee. People know her. She has money. She couldn't get 5% of the vote at a Democratic primary. I'm sorry, Democratic convention. Because if you get 5% or more, you can speak. Our governor made sure she couldn't get 5% or more by bullying everyone around to make sure nobody would vote for her, so she couldn't even speak. Which means, in the way it works in New York State, is that becomes an uncontested convention, which means she can't be on the ballot. She had to go out and get 15,000 signatures, even though she's a famous actor.
Yeah, but she's also, this is New York State, and she's up against the Cuomo crime family.
Yes,
I mean, she's going to find herself out in a swamp somewhere in New Jersey if she's not careful.
But my point is, she's got enough money to hire thugs of her own. Yeah. She could hire counter thugs and get a street battle if she wanted to. I mean, she's got the cash to do it, right? Yeah. And even with she dropped literally $60,000 to get those signatures, and he was going to fight them. And then when she got on, she still lost the primary. So your question's a valid question. I get it, and people try it. The system makes it impossible is the reason why. The answer is LP. And people have come to me, many people have called and asked, hey, Larry, how do I go independent? I tell them, and they go, oh, my God, it's impossible. I go, yep, come LP. I don't bother. The LP is the only third party with infrastructure that can get you on the ballot. That is your answer, Jeff.
Yeah, I mean, getting on the ballot is one thing. Running is another. I mean, when I used to work for Ron Paul, people came to us all the time, said, I want to run for X, Y, or Z. And I've got all these great ideas. But they didn't have any accomplishment in their personal life.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, I agree with you, Dr. Paul, on X, Y, or Z. Okay. But people, here's the big mistake, especially if you're going to be involved in politics. And I'm not sure you should be. But if you're going to be, play the game. And so this idea that people vote for ideas or ideology is just absolute nonsense. People vote for people. I mean, it's so obvious. I mean, this is just absolutely clear. So, the idea that I have the best ideas, but I have zero name ID.
Yep.
I have no money. I have no contacts. I have no particular achievement in life. I mean, when people run for Congress successfully, I'm most familiar with U.S. Congress. So let's use that as an example. Okay. When people run for Congress anew for the first time, okay, there's people who actually win. They're smart about it. First of all, they wait until an incumbent is set to retire.
Sure.
For one. Okay. Don't run. Number two, oftentimes they have local name ID.
Yes.
They're a car dealer, so there's car dealerships with their name on it. Ron was a medical doctor and had delivered lots of babies. So, he had some name ID. I mean, whatever it is. I mean, someone like Arnold had name ID when he ran for governor, obviously big time. So did the Sackett. So name ID is a big hurdle. But the other thing is that, first of all, any candidate who's not willing to put 10 or 15 grand of his or her own money into an initial poll is not serious. And second of all, any candidate who can't, for Congress, I'm talking about U.S. House, who can't go raise at least 50 or 100 grand to do some additional initial polling, is not a serious candidate. And so
you're preaching to the choir, brother.
You're just not a serious candidate. And so doctors, business people with some context, I mean, can go do this. So if people won't give you money, they won't vote for you either. So if you're not fundraising, if you're not polling, you're not running.
Everything you've said, I agree with, and I've literally said when people want to run, the problem again with third parties is a lot of people run third party because they're angry and they can't get on the ballot anyway else. So this is almost like it's almost like therapy for them to be forward with you. It is also often a vanity run. I have ideas. Listen to me, somebody, damn it, and they go off and they run. But they're actually not trying to win. So it isn't that important. But my issue here is, my problem is what you just said. If we have too many of them in the Libertarian Party, you get donor burnout, you get activist burnout, you get volunteer burnout, people who are wasting time on someone else's vanity run or someone else's therapeutic run when they should be spending time and energy on someone who could actually make impact. And I don't mean you have to actually win. I hope they all win. But even if you're able to either make a big dent or change someone's mind or gain ballot access or build your team or any of those things and building infrastructure, I think that's a valuable run. And when people come to me, I ask them, what's your win, right? How do you know you've won if you don't win? What's your goal? If they can't tell me, I don't want them to run. Or other thing I ask them, if when you're done running, assuming you lose, will you personally be better off or worse off? And if they say, well, if I lose, I'm screwed, don't run.
Yeah.
Don't do that. And I'll say the same thing. I don't only want them to be able to raise money, but they have to build a team. If you can't build a team, how are you going to govern? How are you going to fill your staff? You've got to raise money and build it. Well, I don't need to raise money because I have good ideas. No, don't run. Or I don't need to raise money because I don't want to. Don't run. And to your point, when I ran in 2018, my first donor was me. I wrote myself a check for $10,000. And then I went out and I asked for money and I raised $500,000. So I'm completely with you. I agree. And I can talk trash because I did it. So I now get to talk trash about it. I completely agree. I want more people doing exactly that.
Well, but you have to define win. There's no there's no such thing as fair in politics. Right. You can't say, oh, it's unfair. I mean, politics is war, is mini war. It's war by other means.
100%.
It is a turf battle to have control over other human beings. Now, libertarians hopefully would not exert or apply that, but I mean, that's what it is. It's a turf battle, and we're the turf.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So you got to understand that. And it always struck me when people would come into Ron's office, say something like, well, I'm writing a book that's about how we need to get back to the original meaning of the Constitution or something. I mean, just this kind of stuff that was so pie in the sky.
Yep.
I don't like it. And I think the thing about the LP from my perspective is that it's just so broad. I mean, here's what I want to say this might've been 2015-ish.
Mm-hmm.
I was at the Libertarian Party convention, I want to say in Texas. It was in San Antonio.
Okay.
So it might've been 2015 or 2014, thereabouts. And here's what I said. I said, don't run anyone for president. Get every LP member, activist, voter in the whole country, choose one House or Senate seat, U.S. House or U.S. Senate seat with a retiring incumbent where maybe you have some favorable traction because of the makeup of the state, Alaska, New Hampshire, someplace, Wyoming, someplace maybe with a smaller population where just, let's say in a U.S. House race where 110,000 votes is going to be enough in a 700-something thousand person congressional district. Okay. Because you need that first L, big L in Congress to be a procedural headache for both parties. Okay. And to just stir it up, get on TV, all that kind of thing. And tell everyone across 50 states to pour every resource, every bit of volunteer donor time, every cent of money into that one race where you've done a ton of polling, a ton of on the ground, scouting, and determine that there's a vulnerability in the system. Instead of having Gary Johnson, fly around to Ramada Inns or something, so I think
I get the point.
You have to fight a guerrilla war using guerrilla tactics.
I get your concept. There are several things that just can't happen. The first one is we're not organized enough to even do that. We couldn't even get everyone on the same page to agree which one. Plus, that's centralized control. See, we're not good at that. So I think a lot of those things, while it sounds great, and I get it, I don't think it's going to happen. But there's one bigger issue. If we did it, if we all agreed this is the right, and we did it, and we got a congressman from Alaska, we got that. What would we have built throughout the rest of the country? Nothing. We'd only have a guy in Alaska. We wouldn't have infrastructure in other states. But more importantly, and this is my very important view that many people would disagree, this is not just a political war. It is, but it's also a cultural war. And if I can't get enough people to believe that we're right, if I can't get enough Americans to believe that we actually have better answers and that we're actually the only way of survival, right? This country is on its way to violence. At the end of this year, Trump wins or loses. If he wins, the left will say, it was the Russians. If he loses, the right will say, it was the deep state. And now people are unhappy and there's literally sporadic violence in our streets. That's going to happen this year if something doesn't happen. The liberty movement is the only way that is exactly what you're saying you don't like. It's the big tent. It's the tent that takes everybody in and says, you can be as liberal or as conservative as you want to be. Just don't force your views on others. You don't want to be free? Don't be free. Just don't force me to be enslaved. That's the only way.
But from where I sit, the Libertarian Party has chosen the left cultural aisle.
Really?
That is part and parcel of being a big L libertarian. Absolutely.
I think a lot of people would disagree with that one. I deal with the party all the time, and what I hear is every other week it's the right's taking over the party, and then the other week the left's taking over the party. I hear like every other week I hear someone telling me the other side's winning.
I'm giving you my perception as an outsider.
Oh, okay. I don't know. And I think if I talk to most Americans who aren't even in this world, the average American thinks libertarians are hardcore Republicans. They think libertarians are on the right.
Right.
I mean, if you watched Amash, he did his interview on Bill Maher, And at the end of it, Bill Maher was like, you took that from the Republican Party. That's how you act. So I think the average American thinks the Libertarian Party is more right. And I think in the party, I hear both sides constantly. I'm not sure it's true. Just my view. I'm not sure it's true.
Well, at this point, I think libertarianism is less and less interesting. In other words, I'm interested in liberty, political liberty.
Sure.
As are you. And
Absolutely.
And political liberty, yes, would create the conditions for all of us as individuals to lead or at least pursue a more self-actualized life. Yes. I don't think self-actualization is a political goal. I think that ought to be wholly separate from your politics. Okay?
Sure.
But if we think back, okay, in the 19th century conception of liberalism morphed as the 20th century unfolded. We started to get the New Deal. We got central banking. We got insurance reform. We got 2 world wars. We got the IRS. All these other things. So, as a reactionary, people don't want to. All the sort of libertarians hate to think of themselves as reactionaries. But so much of what you and I consider libertarianism is a reaction to the relentless progressive movement of the 20th century. It just is. To be a libertarian is to be a reactionary. I'm sorry, folks. Okay, you are reacting against the Leviathan state of the West in the 20th century. So as the 20th century unfolds, old-fashioned liberals like Ludwig von Mises or Friedrich Hayek become uncomfortable with the term and the way it's being used, the way it's being co-opted by Marxists and Keynesians, and start calling themselves classical liberals. Okay, term that we still got today. So out of that, from that flows a more radical vision of libertarianism. So if you go back to let's say 50s, 60s, 70s, okay, Larry, you had Morris and Linda Tannehill writing their book about, at the time, thin volume, very radical book about how, all kinds of things we think can only be provided by government, like courts and police, could actually be privatized, and using insurance, radical stuff. Okay. Murray Rothbard comes along and starts to say, Mises' utilitarianism is not sufficient. We need an actual normative, ethical argument for liberty as state power or state force is just as illegitimate from an ethical perspective as the criminals, mugging you. Okay. And
that's a hard one to swallow for a lot of people.
Right. It's a hard one to swallow, but nonetheless, you have from an ideological or academic perspective, you have an exciting time. Okay. You have Sam Konkin. Sam Konkin comes up with agorism and starts writing books about how, you should operate in gray markets. So all of this is new, and then, you go on a little farther and someone like Hoppe sort of writes a little bit more on the nature of the state. So libertarianism as a subject or a philosophy or an ideology to be studied, that was very interesting, I think, for several decades. New, fresh, exciting, even radical. I think we're kind of past that. I don't think there's a lot more that can be said or studied or written about the nature and role of the state. I hate to say it, but I think we're kind of up against that. I think all the arguments have been made. In 1975, if you wanted to read Rothbard,
hold on. Let me touch it.
In 1975, if you wanted to read Rothbard, your local mall bookstore didn't have it. Your university library, you had to go to some like laissez-faire books or something.
Right.
Okay, but now things are different. You have all of this. You have all this at your fingertips. So it seems to me that people have spent so much time on what it means to be a libertarian. I just don't care about that anymore. I'm interested in political liberty, and I'm interested in tactically or strategically how we might move more rapidly or at least at all towards that. But it seems like we're wrapped up in this idea of who's a libertarian, what's a libertarian. And that to me is increasingly uninteresting.
Let me cover 2 of those pieces. The first piece, I'll touch your last piece first, which is I agree. I don't care who's libertarian. My answer has always been bring them all. I want to turn them all to the best of my ability. I want to turn all of them. I want to get people to realize that freedom is a better way of doing things. Even if you don't want to be free, let others be free. You could still do it. It can still work. I focus what I think the new idea is right? This is my view and what I've seen. I think everything you're saying is correct. I don't think you have many of those people doing that. My new idea is two separate pieces to our movement. One, the liberty movement's not about liberty or freedom. It's actually about happiness. Now, this is radical because you were just saying someone's self-actualization should be separate. I'm saying it should be, but let's show that there's a way to get there through government or lack of government, right? So life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. That's our divorce papers from the UK, right? That's what they say, right? Life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. Well, I can't pursue happiness without liberty. So let's, as libertarians, stop talking so much about freedom and liberty and instead start talking about how the hell can you be happy? Well, you can't be happy if everything you do that's happy costs money or is all about government licensing or is all about government getting in the way or you don't have choices. Right along with that, the idea of breaking monopoly. People hate monopoly. It's an American thing. We don't like monopoly. It feels bad. It's not good. Once I tell people, well, isn't the FDA a monopoly? Isn't government monopoly? They go, yeah, let's break monopoly. Give people other choices on their route to happiness. I think, and only from my people I've talked to as I've gone around, people I've moved, this is, in my view, the new form of libertarianism. Breaking the monopoly and getting us to happiness. Because we are a nation full of unhappy, depressed people who are sitting there seeing everything become Google. That's what everything's becoming Google, the monopoly. And we are depressed and we are sad and sick. You do those two things, you're interesting again. Those two things, people follow you. That's my 2 cents. Anyway, I've yapped away. I've yapped away like this other more. I apologize.
So how are you going to run? I mean, with COVID, what is your campaign going to look like? I don't know. I think you can go fly on an airplane right now if you want to. The question is whether you can get anybody to come see you.
The issue is who's going to be the presidential candidate, right? Whoever that person is, I become support staff, right? That's what I become. I become the person in the president's ear, in the president candidate's ear. I become support staff. So where they tell me to go is where I go. The advantage is I live in New York City. So when there's press, I can show up in his or her stead whenever they can't make it. So if COVID shuts them down, I jump in an Uber or on a subway or whatever. I walk, I head into Manhattan and I get on TV. So we do it through press. We do it through this. And we do it through travel when it's required. That's how we do it. So anyway, Jeff, I kept you far too long. I want to let you go. Thank you so much for coming on today. I thought great conversation.
Hey,
lots of people. I mean, it's
definitely an open and honest conversation.
Absolutely. And people who want to know more about Mises, please head on down there. Head down to Mises.org. They have books, they have blogs, they have videos, they've got policy, they've got everything you can imagine, podcasts. If you want to know what they're doing, head on over there. You can donate. If you want to donate and help them out, please do that also. Give Mises a look. Jeff, thank you so much for today. I'm sure we'll be doing this again.
All right, Larry. Great talking to you. See you soon.
All right.